All right, so there's a big week ahead in the ongoing Epstein file saga. On Monday, members of the House Oversight Committee will depose convicted Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. Also on Monday, members of Congress will get their first chance to review the unredacted versions of the 3 million recently released files. Meanwhile, some repercussions to the Epstein files are already playing out overseas. Former UK ambassador to the United States, Peter Mendelsohn, is retiring from Parliament's upper chamber due to his links to Epstein. He was fired as ambassador by Prime Minister Keir Starmer back in September over his ties to Epstein. Mendelsohn has denied any knowledge of or complicity in Epstein's sexual crimes.
Welcome to Dr. John Podcast. So what just happened? The House just dropped a 7-article impeachment backed by over 140 Democrats. Not threats, not posturing, the real thing. Trump has gone completely unglued on Truth Social. But what should terrify Republicans tonight isn't the Democratic votes. It's the silence from within their own party and the cracks that are starting to show. Let me walk you through exactly what just happened, because the details here are explosive.
And now Starmer is also facing growing calls to resign since he appointed Mendelsohn. In countries like Poland, Norway, France, and Slovakia, we are now seeing a flood of investigations and resignations into people linked to the late sex offender. But here at home, the latest batch of documents are being slammed over questionable reactions. For example, take a look at this 2014 email addressed to Epstein. It reads, quote, "Thank you for a fun night. Your littlest girl was a little naughty." The sender's name is redacted, and it is a reminder of the sensitive matter being dealt with here and why the push for accountability is so dire.
House Democrats, led by Representatives Hank Johnson and Al Green, did not introduce some watered-down resolution designed to make a statement and then quietly die in committee. They went for the jugular. House Resolution 353, 7 articles of impeachment, 7 distinct charges, each one grounded in documented evidence that has already been tested in courtrooms and judicial proceedings.
But getting full accountability appears to still be a long ways off under the Trump administration. Take a listen to this statement made by Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche about the people named in the files.
It is not a crime to party with Mr. Epstein. And so as horrible as it's not a crime to email with Mr. Epstein. And some of these men may have done horrible things. And if we have evidence that allows us to prosecute them, you better believe we will. But it's also the kind of thing that the American people need to understand, that it isn't a crime to party with Mr. Epstein.
We are talking about abuse of power, obstruction of justice through the Department of Justice, perjury, unauthorized military action in Iran without congressional approval, and weaponizing the Justice Department against political opponents. These are not accusations pulled from thin air. These are built on sworn testimony, court filings, and judicial findings that have already been handed down by federal judges. Now, let me pause here and let that sink in.
Joining us now, California Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs. She serves on the Foreign Affairs and Armed Services Committees. Congresswoman, it's good to have you here. So as we mentioned, we're starting to see some fallout overseas, resignations, investigations. But here domestically, the administration seems to at least be stonewalling any credible attempt at accountability. And it's interesting when you see the names that are redacted, and I want to get to your thoughts on this whole redaction issue, and certainly going forward in the week ahead. Some of the people whose names are redacted had some of the most disgusting and vile comments that were made. It wasn't just about partying. There were clearly innuendos and references to young girls in very disturbing ways. And yet there are names that are not redacted.
A federal judge has already found that the Trump administration lied under oath about war costs. A federal judge has already documented perjury committed by DOJ lawyers. That is not speculation. That is not partisan spin. That is a member of the federal judiciary saying, in black and white, that the government deceived the court. And House Democrats are now saying that conduct rises to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors. That is the constitutional standard for impeachment, and they are arguing that Trump crossed that line. The numbers tell you this is serious. 140 Democrats have signed on to this. That is not a fringe faction. That is not the loudest voices on the progressive wing. That is a substantial majority of the Democratic caucus saying, in unison, that this president needs to be held accountable, that the Constitution requires action, that the evidence is too overwhelming to ignore. The vote fell along party lines, which nobody expected otherwise, but that is not the number that matters. The number that should keep Trump awake at night is the one coming out of the Senate. Because here is where this gets genuinely dangerous for him. In a Senate trial, conviction requires a 2/3 majority, 67 senators. Democrats hold 48 seats. That means they need 19 Republicans to cross the aisle and vote to convict. And if you have been watching what has been happening in Washington over the past several weeks, 19 Republican flips no longer sounds like a fantasy. It sounds like a probability. Some political analysts are putting the odds at 67% that Trump actually gets convicted in a Senate trial. 67%. That is not a long shot. That is not wishful thinking from the left. That is a cold, hard assessment based on the political realities that are shifting under Trump's feet right now. So how did we get here? How did we go from a president who seemed bulletproof to a president staring down the barrel of a Senate conviction? The answer is a cascade of failures, resignations, judicial rulings, and scandals that have piled up faster than anyone could have anticipated. Start with the Iran war. Trump greenlit a military conflict without congressional authorization. That alone is a constitutional violation. The War Powers Act exists for a reason, and the framers of the Constitution were explicit about this. Congress declares war. Congress controls the power of the purse. The president does not get to unilaterally decide to put American lives on the line without legislative approval. But Trump did it anyway. And when the costs of that were started to come to light, the administration tried to hide them. This is where Judge Boasberg enters the story. In court proceedings, government lawyers stood up under oath and made representations about the cost of the Iran war that turned out to be false. The judge caught them. The judge documented it. The judge found that the Department of Justice had lied to the court. And those lies were not small. We are talking about $122 billion in hidden war costs. $122 billion that the administration tried to conceal from Congress, from the courts, from the American people. That is not a bookkeeping error. That is not a bureaucratic misstep. That is a deliberate effort to deceive. And when you combine that with the fact that Trump ordered military action without congressional approval in the first place, you start to see the shape of the case against him. Article 1, abuse of power related to the Iran war. Article 2, obstruction of justice through DOJ perjury on the hidden costs. Article 3, unauthorized military action without congressional authorization. These are not abstract legal theories. These are documented violations of the law. Then you have the weaponization of the Justice Department. This is something that has been building for months, and the evidence is now part of the public record. Trump used the DOJ as a political tool, going after his enemies, protecting his allies, turning the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country into an extension of his political operation. That is precisely the kind of abuse of executive power that the impeachment clause was designed to address. When a president uses the levers of government to punish his political opponents, that is not governance. That is tyranny, and the Constitution provides a remedy for it. Now let me tell you about the human cost of all of this, because it matters. Joe Kent, a Trump loyalist, a true believer who had been inside the administration, quit. He resigned because he said he could not defend the Iran war anymore. He could not stand by while the administration lied about costs and pursued military action without congressional oversight. When someone who was that close to the administration, someone who had been a defender of Trump, walks away on moral grounds, that sends a signal. That tells you that people on the inside know something is deeply wrong. That tells you that the administration is fracturing from within. And Ken is not alone. You have judges warning about contempt charges. You have prosecutors stepping away because they do not want to be part of what is happening. You have the Supreme Court pushing back on executive power grabs. You have the intelligence community questioning the entire rationale for the Iran war. The walls are closing in from every direction. And now, on top of all of that, you have the House moving forward with formal impeachment proceedings. This is the moment Trump has been dreading. This is the moment when the system that he has spent years trying to bend to his will finally pushes back. And his response, so far, has been exactly what you would expect from someone who knows he is cornered. Rage, denial, attacks on social media, posting in all caps, calling it a scam, calling it a hoax, calling it a witch hunt. Same words, same tone, same deflection that has been his playbook for years. But here's the problem with that playbook. It does not work when the evidence is sitting on a judge's bench. It does not work when a federal magistrate has already found that your administration committed perjury. It does not work when cabinet members are resigning because they cannot defend your actions anymore. It does not work when the charges are not accusations, but documented findings that have already been tested in a courtroom. You can call a judge a liar, but the record stands. You can call a prosecutor corrupt, but the documents are public. You can scream about witch hunts until you are blue in the face, but when the evidence is there for anyone to read, the deflection starts to look exactly like what it is: desperation. And the timing of this is absolutely brutal for Trump. This impeachment is not happening in a vacuum. It is happening right as everything else is falling apart around him. The cabinet is fracturing. The courts are ruling against him. The DOJ is being exposed for lying. The intelligence community is questioning his decisions. The Supreme Court is pushing back. And now the House is moving forward with impeachment. That is not one crisis. That is a cascading series of failures, each one compounding the last, creating a momentum that is becoming impossible to stop. Think about what this means for the midterms. Republicans are looking at this situation and they are panicking. They know that when a president is impeached, when there is chaos in the cabinet, when judges are finding that the government lied, voters do not respond by giving that president's party more power. They respond by voting for change. They respond by throwing the bums out. And that is the nightmare scenario for every Republican running in a competitive district right now. They wanted to run on inflation, on border security, on energy policy. Instead, they are going to be answering questions about impeachment, about DOJ perjury, about a president who might be convicted in a Senate trial and barred from ever holding federal office again. That last piece is the thing that should terrify Trump more than anything else. Because if the Senate convicts him, if 67 senators vote to remove him from office, they can also vote to bar him from ever holding federal office again. That is not just the end of his presidency. That is the end of his political career. Forever. No comeback. No third try. No redemption tour. The door slams shut and it does not open again. That is why he is raging. That is why he is desperate. That is why he is posting all caps rants on Truth Social instead of mounting a substantive defense. Because he knows what is coming. He knows that the evidence is out there. He knows that the judicial findings are damning. He knows that the cabinet resignations are a signal that people on the inside have lost faith in him. And he knows that there are at least 19 Republican senators who are looking at all of this and asking themselves whether they want to go down with the ship. Let me tell you about those 19 senators. They are not going to be the far-right loyalists who have hitched their wagons to Trump no matter what. Those senators are going to vote to acquit, no matter what the evidence shows. The 19 we are talking about are the ones in competitive states, the ones who are up for re-election, the ones who are watching their approval numbers slide as Trump scandals pile up. Those senators are going to look at the evidence, and they are going to ask themselves one question. Is it worth losing my seat to defend a president who has already been found to have committed perjury through his DOJ? And for more than a few of them, the answer is going to be no. That is how you get to 67. That is how you get to conviction. It is not about Democrats convincing Republicans to betray their party. It is about self-preservation. It is about Republican senators looking at the political wins and deciding that standing with Trump is a losing bet. And when that happens, when the first few Republicans announce that they are going to vote to convict, the dam breaks. Because once the political cost of loyalty becomes higher than the cost of betrayal, the floodgates open. Now, let me be clear about what we are watching unfold here. This is not a normal political moment. This is a constitutional crisis playing out in real time. The House of Representatives has initiated the most serious check that the Constitution provides on executive power. The Senate is about to become the arena where the fate of the presidency will be decided. And the American people are watching every second of it. The articles themselves are worth understanding in detail because they tell the story of what the administration did. Abuse of power, obstruction of justice through DOJ perjury, unauthorized military action in Iran, weaponizing the Justice Department against political opponents. These are not technical violations. These are fundamental breaches of the constitutional order. They go to the very heart of what it means to be a president who operates within the bounds of the law. And the Democrats who brought these articles, they are not doing this lightly. Representatives Hank Johnson and Al Green have been pushing for accountability for a long time. But they waited until the evidence was overwhelming. They waited until judges had ruled. They waited until cabinet members had resigned. They waited until the case was so strong that even Republicans could not ignore it. And now that the case is ready, they are moving forward with the full force of the House Democratic caucus behind them. 140 Democrats. That is the number that matters in the House. That is the number that tells you this is not a fringe effort. That is the number that tells you the Democratic Party is united behind this course of action, and that unity sends a signal to the Senate. It says that this is not about politics. It says that this is about the Constitution. It says that the evidence is so clear that even members of Congress who have been cautious about impeachment, who have been reluctant to move forward, who have wanted to give the administration every benefit of the doubt, have concluded that there is no choice. Trump's response to all of this has been to retreat into the familiar language of grievance. Witch hunt, hoax, scam, deep state. But those words lose their power when the evidence is sitting in a federal courthouse. Those words lose their power when judges have already ruled. Those words lose their power when the people closest to Trump are walking away because they cannot defend what he has done. And that is the thing that Trump does not seem to understand. The witch hunt defense only works when there is no witch. It only works when the accusations are unproven, when the evidence is ambiguous, when it is one person's word against another's. But that is not where we are. We are in a place where a federal judge has already found that the DOJ lied. We are in a place where a Trump loyalist has resigned on moral grounds. We are in a place where the evidence is not contested, where the facts are not in dispute, where the only question is whether those facts rise to the level of impeachable conduct. And the House has answered that question. Yes, they do. This is impeachable. This is exactly what the framers were worried about. This is why they put the impeachment clause in the Constitution. This is the moment that the system was designed to handle. So what happens next? The House will vote. The articles will pass. Trump will be impeached. And then the focus shifts to the Senate, where 67 votes will determine whether he is removed from office and barred from ever holding federal office again. That vote is going to be the most consequential political moment of our lifetimes. It is going to test the character of every Republican senator. It is going to determine the future of the presidency. It is going to decide whether Donald Trump ever gets to run for office again. And right now, the odds say he loses. The odds say that enough Republicans will look at the evidence, look at the political wins, look at the future of their own careers, and decide that conviction is the only viable path forward. The odds say that this presidency is heading toward a conclusion that nobody could have predicted, but that everyone can see coming. Trump is raging. He is screaming into the void on social media. He is calling it a hoax and a scam. But the judges are not hoaxes. The resignations are not scams. The judicial findings are not deep state conspiracies. They are the truth. And the truth is catching up with him faster than he can run. This is the storm. It has arrived. And there is no going back.